Hi everyone, my name is Amber, welcome back to my channel and welcome to Bookmas. So I am going to be posting every single day up until Christmas. I'm pre-recording a lot of the videos, so I don't know which order exactly I'm going to post them in, so I might be quite vague when talking about it. I will be creating a Bookmas playlist, so I'll leave that linked down below for you if you want to go and check out all of my Bookmas videos that are coming up. I'm also going to be doing at least 3 reading sprint live shows in the coming weeks, which I am very excited about. So please subscribe if you are interested in any of those. This is my November wrap-up. I read 18 books in November and I am currently in the middle of 4. So it's going really well. I've had a really good reading month and I'm hoping to carry that on into December. At the beginning of November, I was actually in a bit of a reading slump, I think because I read so many books in October that I kind of burnt myself out, but I read some graphic novels and I got back into the reading mood quite quickly, and now I have sped through a ton of books. I also had a lot of time off, which was really helpful, and it was my birthday, so I was already in like a really good mood and I was feeling really good about reading. So I was going to talk about these in the order that I read them, but I've put them into a weird order in the pile in front of me and I can't be bothered to reorder them. So I'm just going to start from the top of the pile and work my way down with a few ebooks scattered in there as well. Firstly, I read The Hating Game and I didn't like it. I gave this one 1 star. I've actually got a full review coming up of this in a couple of days. This is a contemporary romance book about a woman called Lucy and a guy called Josh, and they are both working for a publishing house which is made up of 2 pre-existing publishing houses that have kind of merged together. So they are in the same position as one another. It's kind of like a shared job and they are both going to compete for a promotion that's coming up, and they apparently hate each other, and the book follows them being rivals and then becoming lovers. Obviously it's a romance book and I just really didn't like it. I didn't like either of the characters. I thought they were both awful people, and I will talk about this more in my review, but I'm very disappointed in this one because I thought I was going to really enjoy it given the positive reviews that it has. I think this has like a 4.5 average on Goodreads and I don't understand why, because these characters are vile, actually vile people. Next I read The Troop, and again I didn't enjoy this one all that much. I gave this one 2.5 stars. This is a horror book and it follows a bunch of Boy Scouts who are on this Canadian, I believe, island. An infected person comes across their camp and starts infecting the others basically. I didn't really like the descriptions in this. I had heard that it had a lot of body horror, which didn't really bother me actually. That part of the book was fine. It was more the kind of visuals and descriptions of eating and overeating and kind of overindulgence that didn't really sit well with me. I'm not saying it was definitely problematic, but I just couldn't really get on board with it myself. Other people might feel differently. I know that quite a few people do enjoy this one. It says here on the back that it's kind of like Lord of the Flies meets The Thing. I've not seen or read The Thing, but it is a little bit like Lord of the Flies, I suppose. I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it, so this was very average for me, which is why I gave it 2.5 stars. Next, I read Losing Earth, which is a non-fiction book for Non-Fiction November. Maybe I should talk about my non-fiction books next. Yeah, let's do that. So this is basically covering the history of climate change in a certain decade, because that is the decade where scientists started to take climate change seriously and started talking about ways to prevent it and try to get certain bills and laws into place to regulate various industries, including the fossil fuel industry, because that is what was destroying the climate. This happened in the 70s. We knew about climate change that early on and we have done absolutely nothing to stop it, and this is like 40-50 years on and we're still having the same argument over whether climate change is real, whether or not we can stop it. And scientists have proven over and over again that we can stop it if we all just group together, but we are not. Instead it's become a political issue, and yeah, it just winds me up. It's something that I'm very passionate about. I think I've said this a lot before in my videos. Environmentalism is kind of a big deal. I feel like a lot of people aren't taking it seriously, or they feel like there's nothing that we can do, but we can. There are things that we can do, it's just we're not, the governments and countries in power are not doing them. So yeah, I gave this one I think 3.5 stars. It's just because it's stuff that I already knew. I think if you either aren't familiar with the history of climate change or you want something to kind of back up your knowledge, then I would recommend picking this one up, but don't expect anything too new if you are well versed in the subject. I'm going to be keeping this book though because I think it's a good reference book to have on my shelf. Another non-fiction book that I read for Non-Fiction November was Princess Diarist by Carrie Fisher. I gave this one 2.5 stars, I think. So it's not that I didn't enjoy it, I just think it was really badly written. And I know that Carrie Fisher wasn't necessarily, you know, an established author, but she had released books prior to this one, I think, and this was just a little bit all over the place. It was more of a stream of consciousness sort of thing. I found it quite difficult to follow in some places because of the wording that Carrie Fisher used. I don't know if she wrote this whole book herself or if she had help, but I think it could have been edited a bit better to make the writing flow a little bit more, because honestly it felt like a teenager was writing this. And I totally understand Carrie Fisher's background, and I'm not saying that the poor writing was due to drug use or due to her mental state at the time, but it did feel a little bit like all over the place, like she was writing bits and pieces and then coming back to it and not really following up on what she was previously writing about, if that makes sense. So this basically covers Carrie Fisher's early movie career, so from when she starred in something called, I think, Shampoo, or I think it was Shampoo, and then got the role in the first Star Wars movie, and then also her affair with Harrison Ford, which I think this is the first book, or the first time that she actually confirmed that the affair was real and it was a thing. I think people had speculated prior to this, but this is where she kind of gave a tell-all, while also trying to be respectful, I think, to Harrison Ford and his family and wife at the time. So yeah, 2.5 stars. I didn't love it, but I'm glad I read it, at least, because it's one that I've been wanting to read for quite a while. I then read From the Ashes, which is another memoir. This one is written by Jesse Thistle, who is First Nations Canadian. His parents were a bit useless, to say the least. So his father gained custody of him and then was absolutely useless as a dad. He and his brothers put into foster care before being shipped off to their grandparents, i.e. like his dad's parents, who raised them. Jesse Thistle had a troubled childhood because of all of this that was going on. I guess it was quite disruptive, and he turned to alcohol and drugs, and then his granddad kicked him out, and then it follows Jesse Thistle being homeless and getting arrested multiple times, and basically just his life from there. I was very engaged by this one. I thought it was a very good story, I guess, of resilience. I felt awful for Jesse Thistle, actually, but it was also really nice to see towards the end where he kind of got his life together with the help of his now wife. He doesn't talk a lot about being First Nations Canadian. Specifically, I think it's Métis, but he does approach the subject at various different points in his life where it's relevant to his story, especially towards the end, because he starts studying Native American or Native Canadian history. So yeah, I think I gave this one 4 stars. It was, again, not really well written. Like, he's not going to win any awards for his writing alone, but the story itself of his life was very intriguing and emotional, and I really enjoyed it. So I think those were all the non-fiction books that I read for Non-Fiction November, the ones I finished anyway. I did have a couple of ones I'm in the middle of, but I'll talk about those at the end of the video. I'm going to talk about a couple of books I don't have physical copies of now. So the first one is America for Beginners. This one follows an Indian, I believe maybe Bengali woman whose controlling husband has died, and she wants to go to America to search for their missing son. So we follow her and various other characters who are helping her on this journey, or just are connected with her on this journey for one reason or another, and we don't initially know why she's looking for her son or why he's missing, and then it gets into that later on in the book. I found this to be very emotional, more emotional than I was thinking it would be. I thought it was going to be kind of a contemporary, not rom-com because it's about an older woman and authors don't tend to write that, but I thought it was going to be kind of like a more jokey, funny book, but it was, and it wasn't. It was very, very emotional. I gave this one 3 stars because it's nowhere near an all-time favourite, but it was still an enjoyable read, and I'm glad that I read it. Then I read a thriller, which was the Sorority Murder. So this one is about a guy. He's a student in college, and he has his own podcast, and he started this podcast because a fellow student, not necessarily a classmate, but it's someone that he vaguely was aware of at college, was killed a few years ago, and he starts this podcast to kind of continue to raise awareness of this and to get the police to look into the case more and find the correct killer, because he doesn't believe that the police's kind of theories on who actually killed the classmate are correct. I think this one is actually really good. I think a lot of people might struggle with it because it's mainly told in kind of dialogue. There aren't many descriptions or any flowery prose or anything, which is fine, it's a thriller. And I actually really enjoyed the dialogue heavy prose, to be honest, because it's based around a podcast, and while it's not told entirely in podcast format, I think it works really well together with that. I gave this one 4 stars. I think it was very fast paced, and I'm going to write a full review on it, and I might do a joint review for this one and another book I'm going to talk about in literally a few seconds, because I did very much enjoy it and I would highly recommend it. I don't think it's getting much hype at the moment, but like I said, really enjoyed it, really liked all of the main characters, and I think it was very cleverly done. And then the other book that I might do a joint review with is The Appeal, which has been very popular here in the UK, but it's not out in the US until January. So I received this one in exchange for an honest review, but it is actually out here physically in the UK as well already. So this one is told in another unique format actually. It's told entirely in emails and messages. It's following 2 caseworkers. I'm not entirely sure if they count as attorneys or not, but they're reading through a bunch of documents at the request of their boss, because he wants them to read through all of this correspondence between this large group of people who all live in the same small town because the boss's client has been accused, he thinks wrongly, of murder, and she also confessed, but he doesn't think that's actually what happened. So he wants his staff to read through all of this correspondence to kind of come to the same conclusion that he has, at least hopefully. So as the reader, you are reading through all of this correspondence as the characters are, which I think was such a clever idea because you don't meet any of the characters in person, so to speak. You're just reading through their correspondence just like the attorneys or lawyers, solicitors, whatever they are doing. And I was absolutely hooked by this one. It was really fast paced because you were reading through so many emails and messages, and so I was flying through it. It is over 400 pages, which is quite long sometimes for a thriller, but I think it worked really well. And it's probably one that I would reread in the future, like in a couple of years maybe, when it's not so fresh in my mind, because I would like to try and put all the puzzle pieces together. It's definitely being marketed as one that you can kind of sink your teeth into and get involved in the case. And I really enjoy small town drama thrillers. They're one of my favourite kinds, so I really enjoyed this one and I gave it 4 stars. Another ebook that I read was Notorious by Cecily von Ziegaser, I think is her name. It's the author of Gossip Girl, and this is the second book in the It Girl series, which is super old by now. I think it's like 16 years old or something. But I read these when I was younger, and I'm kind of reading through the series again when I'm in the mood for something really light and snappy. So this series follows Jenny from the Gossip Girl series, Jenny Humphrey, who has been, I think, kicked out of her New York school and is now going to boarding school upstate or something. It's full of rich people drama. There are a bunch of rich kids who all hate each other for some reason. I really enjoy this series. I gave this one 3 stars because it's not going to win any awards. It's not amazing or anything, but it is fun. Speaking of rereading, I also reread Scythe as part of the book club that I'm a part of that I can't remember the name of. It's the Last to Read book club, and it's hosted by my friends Ellie and Lana, and also Mel. I don't think anyone else hosts it, but I could be wrong. I'll leave a link down below. This is the first book in a dystopian trilogy. I gave this one 4 stars upon a reread. It was still just as good as I remember. It follows 2 teenagers called Citra and Rowan, who are being trained to be Scythes, which is basically like a real life Grim Reaper. So in this world, in this dystopian, utopian world, there's no more death, but in order to control the population, some people are appointed to be Scythes who have to kill people in various ways. They have to kind of figure out how they're going to commit these killings and, you know, how they can deal with that on their conscience, because it's not a very nice thing to have to do. It's very well written. Neil Shusterman always writes really good dystopian fiction, so I'd highly recommend reading this one if you haven't already. I think I've done a full review of this trilogy on my channel a few years ago when I finished it, and I'm looking forward to rereading the next book next month. I then read Clara and the Sun, which I gave 3 stars. This is a sci-fi book about an AI who joins a family to kind of be their assistant to the sick little girl, and that's all I really want to say because it's kind of a more whimsical book that you kind of figure out as you're reading. I think the writing style didn't really work for me. As I said, it was very whimsical, and those kinds of books are not my favourite, so that's why I only gave this one 3 stars. It's not a bad book at all, but it was entertaining and it did make me question a few things, which was good. It's just, I think I preferred the idea a bit more than the actual reading experience. Next, I read Dune. Finally, I finished listening to it today actually, and I enjoyed it. I gave it 3 stars. I'm going to talk about this more, I think, in a book to movies adaptation video that I'm going to do, but I enjoyed the movie a lot more, and I think it complemented the book really well. So when I went to see the movie, I was about halfway through the book, so I got to the point roughly where the movie would end, and I think having read book 1, or the first half of that book first, and then watching the movie and then finishing this book off worked really well for me. I think the movie really enhanced the world building and gave me a clear picture of what was going on, because Frank Herbert likes to waffle and isn't very clear in his world building. Sometimes he just assumes that you know everything already, because I guess he did. The dialogue in his books is also a bit naff in my opinion. It works so much better on screen, I think. I'm probably gonna get loads of sci-fi fans telling me off, but I think the movie was better, but I'm glad that I read the book and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens in movie 2. I also read Clemlandia, which is another dystopian book. This one is one that I think I could probably discuss for quite a while, but I'm going to try to keep it brief. I gave this one 3.5 stars, somewhere in that range. So it's about a woman and her daughter who are living in a dystopian United States. Basically, the government, the country, has run out of money and they're having to try to survive. Thankfully, the main character's mother, biological mother, conveniently started her own, what is essentially a commune in Virginia, and she, the main character, and her daughter are traveling there to find somewhere safe to live. They're hoping it's kind of going to be a safe haven, especially because there are only women living there. There are no men allowed. And I've been reading some reviews of this book and they kind of angered me because because they were talking about how in this like feminist community there are no transgendered women allowed, and the main characters make some transphobic comments and they all hate men and it's not actually feminist. And it's like, yeah, but that is the point. It's not meant to be a real feminist community. It's not real feminism. It's not about equality. It's about how women are, biological women as well, are supposedly better than men and men can't be trusted. And so it's more like radical feminism. And that's the whole point, because those characters are clearly villainous and they don't have good views that you should be agreeing with, I hope. But some of the reviewers really hated this book for that reason, which I find quite amusing, but it also kind of wound me up, because I think in a dystopian book, an author is allowed to talk about evil and negative characters. It doesn't mean that the author necessarily agrees with those views or that the author is saying that they are correct. It's just a dystopian book with terrible people. Anyway, I'm rambling. I thought this was a good book. It was very fast paced. Some of the stuff that happened in this book was absolutely brutal and disgusting and vile, and I read a couple of pages at one point in the book and I had to put the book down. It was way too much for me, and I don't normally get creeped out by books, but this was absolutely awful. I think this author actually writes really good dystopian books. I've read another book by her called Vox, which is her most famous one, and then I've also got Q out from the library, and I'm really looking forward to reading that after reading this one, or after having read this one rather, because I think she writes really good dystopians and she has some really good ideas. I then read volume 9 of Saga. Finally, I've been slowly working my way through these volumes because I knew that the series was on a break after this one, and oh my god, I don't know how they could have ended it there. It was absolutely brutal. Obviously, I can't say much. You probably all know what Saga is about. It's a sci-fi fantasy graphic novel series that follows two people who are forbidden to be together because they're from different species or races, and then they get together, have a child, and it's about them trying to evade various different governments or different people who are after them for various reasons. I really enjoy this series. I'm really looking forward to seeing volume 10 when it eventually comes out. I don't know when it's coming out. I know that the next part or comic is coming out in January, I think, but I don't know if a volume will be coming out at once. I think it might be in a few months time. And then finally, I need to hurry up because my battery is running out. I read most of the Lock and Key books. So I read the first one in October for Halloween. Really enjoyed it. It was a reread. These are all rereads as well because I love them, and I'm really glad that I reread them. So I don't think I gave any book in this series 5 stars on its own, but as a series as a whole, I definitely think it's a 5-star series. I feel the same way about the Scythe trilogy, actually. I think it comes together really well, and I really enjoy them. So I read Head Games, which is the second book. I think I gave that one 4 stars. Crown of Shadows, which again I gave 4 stars. That was book 3. Keys to the Kingdom, which I gave 3 stars originally, but I'm gonna give it 4 stars now because I do really love it. Clockworks, where you find out the history of all the keys and stuff. That's really cool. 4 stars for that. I think I originally gave it 3. And Omega and Alpha, which is the final book in the series, and it's also really long. I did learn from watching Ashley from Bookish Realms TBR video, or it was, no, she doesn't do those anymore. She did a video and was talking about comics, and she said that the Sandman graphic novels actually have a crossover to Lock and Key, so I'm tempted to try those out now, even though I don't really like the author Neil Gaiman. I might give them a go because I am obsessed with this series and I love it so much, so would highly recommend reading these graphic novels if you haven't already. And then finally we have 4 books that I am in the middle of. We have 2 non-fiction and 2 fiction books. First one is The Gift of Fear. I think I was in the middle of this one in October as well. I haven't really read much more of it, but I do want to finish it soon. I'm currently about 50 pages in, and this is basically a non-fiction book about trusting your instincts, kind of listening to that gut feeling. If something tells you that you're in trouble, then you should listen to it, and it's about identifying what exactly your gut is trying to tell you. I'm also in the middle of White Rage, which is a non-fiction book about the racial divide, I think in America mostly. I doubt it covers other countries. So I'm currently about 100 pages in. It's quite dense. The writing is quite small, so I'm taking my time with it. I don't want to rush through. I don't think it's covering anything new because I've read quite a few books on this topic now, but it's fine to kind of like refresh your facts and to read a bit more about the history of the racial divide in the United States between white people and black people. I also just started Dragon Pearl, which is a middle grade fantasy. I think the main character has like fox spirit powers, which is really cool. I'm literally like 20 pages in, but I'm hoping to finish it today as I'm recording this on the 29th, so maybe I will manage that. I've got the day off work, so it's not unreasonable. And then we have The Night Watchmen, which I started, but I just couldn't get into. I don't think I was in the mood for like literary historical fiction. So I'm only 35 pages in, but I am still thinking I'm going to love this book. It's still a 5-star prediction. I just need to be in the right mood for it. And if you remember last month, I spoke about being in the right mood for Black Sun. I put it off for a whole year because I kept trying and I just couldn't get into it. And then eventually I did give it 4 stars because it was actually fantastic. So I'm thinking this the same thing is going to happen with this book, and I'm hopefully going to finish it off in December. So those are the 18 books that I read in November and 4 of the books that I didn't. Let me know if you've read any of these, what your thoughts on them are, if you agree or disagree with me. That is cool. Leave a comment below. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and I'll be back tomorrow with another Bookmas video. Bye!